Hey, this is Paulo at Careful Reading. Today we're going to get into the introduction by Maxime of Anti-Oedipus by Gilles, Deleuze, and Félix Guattari. We must die as egos and be born again in the swarm, not separate and self-hypnotized, but individual and related. Henry Miller, Sexus. The Anti-Ego. Lie down then on the soft couch which the analyst provides and tries to think up something different. The analyst has endless time and patience. Every minute you detain him means money in his pocket, whether you whine, howl, beg, weep, cajole, pray, or curse. He listens. He is just a big ear minus a sympathetic nervous system. He is impervious to everything but truth. If you think it pays to fool him, then fool him. Who will be the loser? If you think he can help you, and not yourself, then stick to him until you rot. So concludes Henry Miller in Sexus, and Gilles, Deleuze, and Félix Guattari are quick to agree in their attack on psychoanalysis' own Oedipus complex. The Holy Family, Daddy, Mommy, Me, an attack that is at times brutal and without pity, and other times sympathetic and full of profound love of life, and often enormously amusing. An attack on ego, on what is all too human, on mankind, an Oedipalized and Oedipalizing analysis, and neurotic mode of living. In confronting and finally overturning the Oedipal rock on which man has chosen to take his stand, Anti-Oedipus comes as a kind of sequel to another similar venture. The attack on Christ, Christianity, the herd, and Nietzsche's The Antics Hearst for who would deny Anti-Oedipus begins. That schizoanalysis was from the start, still is, and perhaps always will be a well-constituted church and a form of treatment based on self-beliefs that only the very faithful could adhere to, i.e. those who believe in security that amounts to being lost in the herd and defined in terms of common and external goals. But where do such beliefs originate? What are they based on? For it is absolutely hopeless to think in terms of security. As Miller states in Sexus, there is none. The man who looks for security, even in the mind, is like a man who would chop off his limbs in order to have artificial ones which will give him no pain or trouble. No pain, no trouble. That's the neurotic dream of a tranquilized and conflict-free existence. Such a set of beliefs Deleuze and Guattari demonstrate. Such a herd instinct is based on the desire to be led, the desire to have someone else legislate life. The very desire that was brought so glaringly into focus with Hitler, Mussolini, and fascism. The desire that is still at work making us all sick today. Anti-Oedipus starts by reviving Reich's completely serious question with respect to the rise of fascism. How could the masses be made to desire their own repression? This is a question which the English and Americans are reluctant to deal with directly, tending too often to respond. Fascism is a phenomenon that took place elsewhere, something that could only happen to others but not to us. It's their problem. Is it, though? Is fascism really a problem for others to deal with? Even revolutionary groups deal gingerly with the fascizing elements who we all carry deep within us, and yet they often possess a rarely analyzed but overriding group superego that leads them to state, much like Nietzsche's man of ressentiment, that other is evil, the fascist, the capitalist, the communist, and hence that they themselves are good. This conclusion is reached as an afterthought, as a justification, a supremely self-righteous rationalization for politics that can only squint at life through a thick cloud of foul-smelling air that permeates secret meetings, places, and security councils. The man of ressentiment, as Nietzsche explains, loves hiding places, secret paths, and back doors. Everything covert entices him as his world, his security, his refreshment. He understands how to keep silent, how not to forget, how to wait, how to be provisionally self-depreciating and humble. Such a man, Nietzsche concludes, needs very much to believe in some neutral, independent subject, the ego, for he is prompted by an instinct of self-affirmation and self-preservation that cares little about preserving or affirming life, an instinct in which every lie is sanctified. This is the realm of the silent majority, and it is into these back rooms, behind the closed doors of the analyst's office and the wings of the Oedipal theater that Deleuze and Guattari weave their way, exclaiming, as does Nietzsche, that it smells bad there, and what is needed is a breath of fresh air, a relationship with the outside world. In examining the problem of the subject, the behind-the-scenes reactive and reactionary man, Anti-Oedipus develops an approach that is decidedly diagnostic. What constitutes our sickness today, and profoundly healing as well? What it attempts to cure us of is the cure itself. Deleuze and Guattari term their approach schizoanalysis, which they oppose on every count to psychoanalysis. What the latter measures everything against neurosis and castration, schizoanalysis begins with the schizo, his breakdowns and his breakthroughs. For they affirm, a schizophrenic out for a walk is a better model than a neurotic laying on an analyst's couch. Against the Oedipal and Oedipalized territorialities, family, church, school, nation, party, and especially the territoriality of the individual, Anti-Oedipus seeks to discover the deterritorialized flows of desires, the flows that have not been reduced to the Oedipal codes and to the neuroticized territorialities of the desiring machines that escape such codes of lines of escape leading elsewhere. Much like R.D. Laing, Deleuze and Guattari aim to develop a materialistically and experientially based analysis of the breakdowns and breakthroughs that characterize some of these labeled schizophrenic by psychiatry, rather than view the creations and productions of desire, all of desiring production, from the point of view of the norm and the normal. They force their analysis into separate spheres of extremes, from paranoia to schizophrenia, from fascism to revolution, from breakdown to breakthroughs. What is investigated in the process of life flows as they oscillate from one extreme to another on a scale of intensity that goes from 0, I never asked to be born, leave me in peace, the body without organs, to the nth power, I am all that exists, all the names of history, the schizophrenic process of desire. The experience of delirium. In order to carry out this ambitious undertaking, Anti-Oedipus makes joyously unorthodox use of many writers and thinkers, whose concepts flow together with all the elements in the book in what might be described as a carefully constructed and executed experiment in delirium. While Deleuze and Guattari quote frequently from Marx and Freud, it would be an error to view Anti-Oedipus as yet another attempt at a Freud-Marx synthesis, for such an attempt always treats political economy, the flows of capital and interest, and the economy of libido, the flow of desire, as two separate economies. Even in the work of Reich, who went as far as possible in this direction, Deleuze and Guattari, on the other hand, postulate one of the same economy, the economy of flows. The flows and production of desire will simply be viewed as the unconscious of the social production, behind every investment of time and interest in capital, an investment of desire, and vice versa. In order to reach this conclusion, a new confrontation was required, not the standard confrontation between a bourgeois Freud and a revolutionary Marx, where Freud ends up the loser, but a more radical confrontation between Marx the revolutionary and Nietzsche the madman. The result of this confrontation, as the authors demonstrate convincingly, is that Freud and psychoanalysis, and perhaps even Lacan, although they remain ambiguous on this point, become impossible. Why Marx and Nietzsche? Now that's really mixing things up. One might protest at this point, but there's really no cause for alarm. Readers of Marx will be happy to learn that Marx fares quite well in this confrontation. One might even say he is trimmed down to bare essentials and improved upon from the point of view of use. Given Deleuze and Guattari's perspective, this confrontation was inevitable. If one wants to do analysis of the flows of money and capital that circulate in society, nothing is more useful than Marx and Marx's theory of money. But if one wishes to analyze the flow of desire, the fears and the anxieties, the love and the despairs that traverse the social field as intensive notes from the underground, i.e. libidinal economy, one must look elsewhere. Since psychoanalysis is of no help, reducing as it does every social manifestation of desire to the familial complex, where is one to turn? To Nietzsche, and Nietzschean theory of effects and intensity. Anti-Oedipus suggests, for here and especially in the genealogy of morals, is a theory of desire and will, of the consciousness and the unconscious forces that relate desire directly to social field and to monetary system based on profit. What Nietzsche teaches is the complement to Marx's theory of alienation. It is how the history of mankind is the history of becoming reactive. And it is Nietzsche, Deleuze, and Guattari stress whose thought already pointed a way out for humanity, whereas Marx and Freud were too ingrained in the culture that they were working against. One could not really view Anti-Oedipus as a purely Nietzschean undertaking. However, for the book would be nothing without the tension between Nietzsche and Marx, between philosophy and politics, and between thought and revolution. The tension, in short, between Deleuze and the philosopher, and Guattari, the militant, this tension is quite novel and leads to a combination of the artistic machine, the revolutionary machine, and the analytical machine, a combination of three modes of knowledge, the intuitive, the practical, and the reflective, which all become joined as bits and pieces of one of the same strategical machine, whose target is the ego and the fascist in each of us, extending through to the point of madness and action, to the point of revolution. Theirs is needed a political experience. The experience, however, is no longer that of a man, but of what is a non-human in man, his desire and his forces, a politics of desire directed against all that is egoic and heroic in man. In addition to Nietzsche, they also found it necessary to listen to others, to Miller and Lawrence and Kafka and Beckett, to Proust and Reich and Foucault, to Burroughs and Ginsberg, each of whom had different insights concerning madness and dissension, politics and desire. They needed everything that they could get their hands on, and they took whatever they could find, in an eclectic fashion closer to Henry Miller than it is to Marx or Freud, more poetic undoubtedly, but also more fun. While Deleuze and Guattari use many authors and concepts, this is never done in an academic fashion aimed at persuading the reader. Rather, they use these names and ideas as effects that traverse their analysis, generating ever new effects as points of reference indeed, but also as points of intensity and signs pointing a way out. Signs, that offers a multiplicity of solutions and a variety of directions for a new style of politics. Such an approach carries much along with it in the course of its flow, but it also leaves much behind. Chunks of Marx and Freud that cannot keep up with the fast current will be left behind, buried or forgotten, while everything in Marx and Freud that has to do with how things and people and desires actually flow will be kept and added to an infernal machine and evoked above. This political analysis of desire, the schizoanalysis, becomes a mighty tool where schizophrenia as a process, the schiz, serves as a point of departure as well as a point of destination. Like Lang, that encouraged mankind to take a journey, the journey through ego loss. They go much further than Liang on this point, however. They urge mankind to strip itself of all anthropomorphic and anthropological armoring, all myth and tragedy, and all existentialism, in order to perceive that what is non-human in man, his will and his forces, his transformations and mutations. The human and social sciences have accustomed us to see the figure of man behind every social event, just as Christianity taught us to see the eye of the Lord looking down upon us. Such forms of knowledge project an image of reality at the expense of reality itself. They talk figures and icons and signs, but fail to perceive forces and flows. They blind us together through realities, and especially the reality of power as it subjugates us. Their function is to tame and the results of the fabrication and docile, obedient subjects.